Tori's scream hit the air before she even realized she was yelling. "Mommy, Mommy, wake up, please, wake up." Nicole dropped to her knees beside Vernie, her hands shaking as she touched her mother's cheek. One moment Vernie was reaching for a plate, the next she was on the floor, silent, eyes half open like she was trapped somewhere far away. Tori's voice cracked as she grabbed the phone, repeating in a panic, "What do I do? What do I do?" Her fingers finally landed on the number their mother once told them to call in an emergency, a number they never questioned. She pressed it. It rang. Miles across Atlanta, inside a polished conference room filled with people waiting on his decisions, Joel Gardell glanced at his phone. He never ignored calls from that label. Not that one. Not emergency contact, old. He stepped away from the table so fast his executives froze mid-sentence. "Hello?" His voice was tight, unsure, hopeful for a familiar answer he hadn't heard in 10 years. What he heard instead was a child's voice drowning in fear. "Please, please help us. Mommy won't wake up." Joel's entire body locked, breath gone, heart slamming. He didn't wait for details. He didn't ask who they were. He didn't care about the million things he was in the middle of. He just ran. Minutes later, he stood at Vernie's apartment door, chest tight, pulse wild. And the moment it opened, every part of his world collapsed in on itself. 2 girls stood there. 2 girls with the same eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. His world didn't just shift, it broke open. Before the story moves forward, let me ask you something real. Have you ever held onto a secret because you believed it was the only way to protect the people you love? Have you ever carried the weight of a truth so heavy that silence felt easier than honesty? Or found yourself avoiding a past you weren't ready to face, only for that same past to knock on your door at the worst possible moment? Most of us know that feeling, the instinct to shield our families from disappointment, judgment, or pain. We tell ourselves we're doing the right thing. We convince ourselves that hiding the truth keeps life steady. But sometimes silence creates its own storm, and when it breaks, the pieces don't fall gently. That's exactly where this story begins. A single mom collapses in her kitchen. Her twins, desperate and terrified, reach for help. They call the only number their mother trusted enough to store under emergency contact, old. They didn't know who was on the other side of the call. They didn't know he once loved their mother. They didn't know he once broke her heart. They didn't know he had spent years wondering why she disappeared. And they definitely didn't know he was the man whose eyes they inherited. A single mother collapsed on her kitchen floor with no warning. Her twins, only 10 years old, were forced to make a decision no child should ever face. They reached for help in the only place their mother told them to. A number saved without explanation, a number connected to a past she refused to revisit. And the man who answered? A billionaire who built an empire but never built a family. A man who believed he had lost the love of his life 10 years ago. A man who didn't know she carried more than heartbreak when she walked away. He didn't know she carried his children. But that truth didn't come gently. It hit him in a single sentence spoken through Tori's tears. "Please. Mommy won't wake up." From that moment on, the story changed direction entirely. What begins as a medical emergency becomes a collision of past choices, hidden truths, and a reality none of them are prepared for. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about identity. It's about responsibility. It's about a man realizing the world he built means nothing if he loses the one thing he never knew he had, a family. And as he races to reach Vernie, he has no idea the next door he opens will show him 2 faces that carry his own reflection. What happens next? Will Vernie survive long enough to face the truth she's been running from for a decade? Will she open her eyes to the man she never wanted to see again? The man she once loved, the man she kept her daughters away from, the man she trusted just enough to save under a name she hoped never to dial. And what does a man do when he steps into an apartment expecting a stranger, only to find 2 girls who carry his exact features staring back at him with fear and hope intertwined? This isn't just a medical crisis. This is a collision of past choices and present consequences, the kind that forces everyone involved to confront what they avoided for years. Because when a man who lost everything discovers he has children he never knew existed, and when a woman fighting for her life can no longer hide the truth she built her world around, everything changes. Families shift, hearts crack open, old wounds return, and the future becomes something none of them ever expected. Please tap the like button and drop a quick comment. It helps this video reach more people who need stories that teach, comfort, and remind us of what family truly means. Your engagement pushes this story out to thousands of viewers who would never find it otherwise. And if you're new here, welcome. You're in the right place. This channel is all about real, human stories, the kind that stay with you long after the video ends. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could shift your perspective or help someone you love. Now, let's continue, because the moment Tori whispered, "Please, help us," everything in Joel Gardell's life moved toward one truth he wasn't ready for. And when he reached that apartment door moments later, nothing prepared him for the sight waiting on the other side. Two girls, two frightened faces, two sets of eyes identical to his, a mirror he didn't know existed. The phone almost slipped out of Tori's hands. Her fingers were trembling so hard she could barely keep it against her ear. Nicole knelt beside their mother, brushing hair away from Vernie's forehead, whispering her name like she was afraid the silence might swallow them whole. "Mommy, Mommy, please." Nicole's voice cracked, small and breaking. On the other end of the call, Joel's breath froze as he heard the panic. He hadn't heard a child's voice like that directed at him before, desperate, shaking, holding nothing back. He forced himself to speak calmly, even though his pulse was pounding against his ribs. "Sweetheart, slow down. Tell me what's happening." Tori gulped air like she was drowning. She was standing, and now she's not waking up. "I don't know what to do. Please, help us." That last sentence shattered something inside him. He pressed the phone tighter to his ear and stepped into the hallway outside his meeting, ignoring every startled look around him. "Are you alone?" he asked, his voice tightening. "It's just me and my sister." Tori's breath hitched. Please hurry. Mommy won't wake up." Her words echoed straight through him, sharp, heavy, undeniable. In that moment, everything in Joel's life shifted. Nothing else mattered. Not the company, not the people calling his name down the hallway, not the commitments waiting on his calendar. A child had asked him for help, a child connected to a woman he never forgot. He didn't need directions. He remembered the address he swore he'd never return to. And he ran. Joel reached the apartment complex faster than he thought possible, barely remembering the turns he took to get there. His chest was tight, not from running, but from the dread building with every step toward the familiar door he once stood in front of years ago. He knocked once, firm, controlled, but the moment it opened, all control left him. Two girls stood there. Two girls with curls falling around their faces, fear written in their eyes. Eyes that carried a color he had only ever seen in the mirror. He froze. The twins stared back at him, as if they were trying to decide whether he was hope or danger. Nicole clung to the doorframe, her lower lip trembling. Tori stepped forward, still holding the phone she had used to call him moments earlier. "Are you the man who can help our mom?" Tori asked, her voice tight, fighting to stay strong. Joel opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. His mind wasn't catching up fast enough. He wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't prepared for them. Those eyes, their expressions, the faint dimple that appeared on Tori's cheek when she swallowed hard, the way Nicole tilted her head, a habit he'd had since he was their age. All of it hit him at once. These children weren't strangers. They were pieces of a truth he never knew existed. He gathered himself, just enough to kneel so he was eye level with them. "Where's your mother now?" he asked softly. Tori pointed inside. "She's not waking up." In that instant, disbelief gave way to instinct. Protective, fierce, immediate. Joel stepped into the apartment with one clear purpose: to save the woman he once loved. And the daughters he never knew were his. Morning in Verney Danner's neighborhood always sounded awake before the sun even thought about climbing up the sky. Atlanta had its own rhythm, especially on the side where folks looked out for each other because life didn't give them much else. Doors opened early, cars coughed alive, and conversations traveled across balconies like everybody was part of the same big family whether they wanted to be or not. Verney stood at her small kitchen counter, waiting for the kettle to finish boiling. She rubbed her temples gently, trying to ease the dull ache sitting behind her eyes. The morning light coming through the blinds made her blink a few extra times, but she pushed through it like she always did. She had grown used to moving, even when her body whispered for rest. She leaned slightly on the counter for balance, steadying her breath. The dizziness wasn't strong, just enough to make her pause. That had been happening more often lately. A brief wave of fog, a quick flicker of darkness behind her eyes. She had told herself it was stress, long nights, and the weight of raising 2 children alone while trying to keep rent paid and bills quiet. From the hallway, Tori's voice carried out first. "Mom, do we have any more of the cereal I like?" Her tone already had a spark of impatience, 10 years old with the confidence of somebody twice her age. Nicole followed, slower and softer. "Morning, Mommy," she said, stopping near the table and watching her mother with eyes that always noticed more than they should. Vernie forced a smile, hoping it reached her eyes. "Good morning, baby. I think there's one more box in the pantry. Tori, grab it before your sister gets upset." "I'm not upset," Nicole murmured, sitting down gingerly. "I just didn't want toast again." Tori appeared at the pantry door, holding the cereal triumphantly. "See? Knew it was still here." Then she paused, squinting at her mother. "Mom, you okay?" "You're moving slow." Vernie picked up the kettle, but her hand trembled slightly, enough for the girls to notice. She set it back down gently. "Just tired, baby. Long week." She wanted to shake off the lingering fog in her head, but it clung to her like humidity after rain. Nicole pressed her lips together. "Your eyes look different today." "Different how?" Vernie asked, trying to sound casual. "Like you're thinking too hard," Nicole answered. Tori tilted her head. "Or like you didn't sleep." "Well," Vernie said, "maybe because 2 little girls kept asking for snacks at midnight." Tori smirked, though worry still flickered in her eyes. "We did not." Nicole nodded. "We kind of did." Their small laughter warmed the room for a moment, but Vernie felt another pulse of discomfort behind her eyes. She blinked it away. She didn't want to alarm them. She didn't have the space in her life to be sick. There were bills stacked on the counter behind the fruit bowl, a reminder that missing even one shift could throw everything off balance. She moved to grab a plate from the cabinet. As she lifted her arm, her fingers tingled, pins and needles racing from her fingertips up her wrist. She paused, flexing her hand to shake it off. Another whisper of dizziness drifted through her. Nicole noticed instantly. "Mommy, your hand." "I'm fine," Vernie said quickly. She hated how easily that phrase came out. Just need to eat something." Tori wasn't convinced. She walked closer, her tone sharper than her sister's. "Mom, sit down. You're pale." "I said I'm fine," Vernie replied, though the room behind the girls had started to blur slightly. She reached for the plate again. This time, her vision smeared like water across glass. Her knees weakened. The plate slipped from her fingers before she even understood what was happening. She felt the floor rise toward her faster than she could catch herself. There was no dramatic crash, no scream from her mouth, just a soft thud, a breath leaving her chest, a stillness that shouldn't have been there. "Mommy," Nicole whispered, her voice rising into panic. She crouched beside Vernie, touching her mother's cheek with trembling hands. "Mommy, please wake up." Tori froze for 2 full seconds, eyes wide, breath trapped somewhere between her ribs and throat. Then she snapped into action, grabbing the phone on the counter with shaking fingers. "Nicole, get her arm, shake her. Maybe she'll wake up." Tori yelled, her voice cracking. Nicole followed, shaking gently. "Mommy, wake up, please, please." Tori fumbled through the phone screen, her breaths coming out fast. "What do I do? What do I do?" She repeated the question like it might magically offer an answer. Then something clicked in her memory. A moment months ago when Vernie said quietly, "If anything ever happens, call the number saved as emergency contact old. Don't ask questions, just call." At the time, Tori had shrugged it off. But now, the words hit her like a beam of light cutting through panic. She scrolled quickly, hands trembling so violently she almost dropped the phone. She found it. Emergency contact old. No name, no hint of who the person was. Just that label. "Nicole, I'm calling someone," Tori said, pressing the number. "Who?" Nicole whispered. "I don't know." Tori snapped, tears forming now. "I don't know, but Mommy told us to." She hit call. The ringing filled the room, sharp, loud, urgent. On the 3rd ring, a deep voice answered. "Hello?" The tone was tense, controlled, like the caller wasn't expecting anyone but dreaded missing whoever it might be. Tori choked out, "Please, please help us." The voice shifted instantly. "Sweetheart, what's happening?" "It's my mom," Tori sobbed. "She's on the floor. She won't wake up." Nicole cried harder, her small hands clinging to Vernie's arm. There was a long silence on the other end, the kind that comes when a truth hits too hard and too fast. Then the man spoke again, his voice steadier but filled with alarm. "Tell me your address. I'm coming now." Tori gave it quickly, stumbling over the numbers. "I'm on my way," he said. "Stay with her. Don't leave her side." The call ended. He didn't say his name. He didn't ask who they were. He didn't question how a stranger had his number. But he remembered the address. In a skyscraper boardroom across the city, Joel Gardell stared at his phone, the label "Emergency Contact" old, still glowing on the screen as the last words echoed in his mind. "Mommy won't wake up." The boardroom dissolved around him. The city noise lost all meaning. He pushed back his chair with a force that startled the people sitting nearby. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't offer explanations. He just left. He moved with urgency, fear, and something else rising in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Something tied to the woman whose name he didn't dare speak anymore. He rushed toward the elevator, heart pounding, realizing only one thing mattered. Vernee needed him. And 2 children he had never met were waiting. Joel reached the ground floor of his building with a pace so sharp that the security guard at the lobby door took a step back. He didn't stop to explain anything. His focus had narrowed into a single target, getting to the address burned into his memory, the one he believed he'd never see again. Outside, the morning air hit him with a jolt, but it didn't slow him. He crossed the sidewalk, unlocked his car with a quick motion, and slid behind the wheel. His hands shook, a tremor so faint that only someone paying close attention would notice, but he felt it clearly. It wasn't fear alone. It was something older, deeper, reaching up from a place he had buried a decade ago. The words replayed in his mind. "She's on the floor. She won't wake up." He gripped the steering wheel, fighting the tightness in his chest. The memory of Vernee's voice, warm, steady, often carrying more strength than she should have had, rushed through him without permission. He hadn't heard her in years, yet her presence felt close, almost too close. Traffic was heavier than he wanted, but he maneuvered through it with urgency. His pulse throbbed in his ears. Every red light felt like a personal attack. Every slow driver sparked frustration he didn't have time to express. He checked the clock twice, then forced himself to stop. Time wasn't moving slower, he was simply moving too fast in his mind. He whispered, almost to himself, "Hold on, please hold on." It was strange how easily the plea came out. A decade ago, he had spoken her name with certainty, believing she'd always be nearby. Now he spoke into the silence, hoping she could somehow hear him. When he finally turned onto her street, his breath tightened again. He remembered these buildings. He remembered the look she once gave him here, half hopeful, half unsure, when they were younger and trying to bridge 2 very different worlds. He even remembered which staircase creaked a little on the 3rd step. He parked unevenly, not caring if his car blocked anything. He ran toward her door, not stopping to think about what he was about to face. He only knew he needed to reach her. He knocked once, firm but breathless. The door opened quickly. 2 girls stood there. They looked small, frightened, and worn from crying. Their curls framed their faces, and their eyes, those unmistakable blue-green eyes, hit him with such force that he forgot how to breathe. For a brief moment, he could only stare. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because something inside him recognized them before his mind understood the recognition. Nicole stepped slightly behind her sister, gripping the edge of the door as if it were anchoring her. Tori stayed in front, shoulders tense, trying to appear stronger than she felt. "Are you the one we called?" Tori asked, her voice carrying the weight of the last few minutes. Her face looked like it had aged an hour in panic. Joel swallowed hard, forcing words out. "Yes, I'm the one." Her shoulders loosened just enough for him to see her relief. "Mom is inside. She's not waking up. We don't know what to do." His chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't panic alone. It was heartbreak layered with a decade of silence. "Where is she?" he asked quietly. Tori stepped aside, motioning him into the apartment. "In the kitchen." He entered, his eyes sweeping over the space that felt both familiar and distant. The scent of breakfast still lingered faintly in the air. He walked toward the kitchen with the girls following close behind him. There she was. Vernee lay on the floor, her curls spread around her head, her face far too still. His breath caught in his throat. He moved toward her and crouched beside her, gently sliding one arm under her shoulders and the other behind her knees. "Is she going to be okay?" Nicole asked, her voice barely audible. "I'm taking her to the hospital," Joel said. standing carefully with Vernie in his arms. "But I need you two with me." Tori nodded quickly. "We already have our shoes on." He glanced at them, two frightened children trying so hard to be steady. For a moment, something soft tugged inside his chest, something he didn't have the time or emotional distance to analyze. He carried Vernie toward the door, her weight both familiar and unfamiliar. It had been years since he last held her, but her presence had never fully left him. It lived in the corners of his memory, in the regrets he never voiced, in the promises he failed to keep. The girls followed him down the steps, their small footsteps echoing after his. Joel carefully placed Vernie in the back seat. Resting her head against a folded jacket he grabbed to cushion her. He turned to the twins. "Sit close to her. Keep her steady." They climbed in without hesitation. Nicole held her mother's hand immediately, whispering something too soft for him to hear. Tori wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, trying to stop tears that kept slipping out. Joel got into the driver's seat, started the car, and pulled out quickly yet carefully. "Will she wake up soon?" Tori asked, leaning forward slightly. "We're getting her help," he said, his voice low but firm. "That's what matters right now." Nicole lifted her gaze to the rearview mirror, meeting his eyes. "Why do your eyes look like ours?" The question hit him harder than he expected. His breath stilled for a few seconds before he answered. "We'll talk about that, I promise. But we need to focus on your mom first." The girls exchanged a glance filled with confusion and something else, something unspoken but powerful. Joel drove fast but steady, his hands gripping the wheel, his thoughts racing. The hospital wasn't far, but every second felt stretched. He checked the mirror repeatedly, not just to see the road, but to make sure the girls were okay. He whispered again, almost to himself, "Just hold on, Vernie." The sirens in the distance, the hum of traffic, the weight of the moment, everything pressed in on him, yet he pushed through it all. He wasn't leaving her again. Not now, not like this. And as they approached the hospital entrance, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever was waiting for them next would change all of their lives. Joel pulled up to the emergency entrance, with urgency but steady control. He parked near the sliding doors, ignoring the markings that said the space wasn't meant for him. He stepped out of the car quickly and opened the back door where Vernie lay slumped against the seat. The twins looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes that made his stomach twist even tighter. "Stay right here for a moment," he told them gently. He lifted Vernie carefully, adjusting his hold so her head rested securely against his chest. Her skin felt cooler than it should have been, and that alone sent a sharp worry through him. For a second, he lost his breath, not from the weight he carried, but from the memory of how she once felt warm and alive in his arms. This was a version of her he never wanted to meet again. When he stepped inside the hospital, the lights and noise created an immediate rush of movement around him. A nurse at the desk saw the way he held Vernie and stood up instantly. "She collapsed," Joel said, trying to keep his voice steady. "She's not waking up." The nurse waved another staff member over. "Room 3. Move quickly." Joel laid Vernie onto the gurney they brought. As soon as he stepped back, the nurses surrounded her, attaching monitors, adjusting her head, and asking each other brisk questions he couldn't follow. He found himself frozen in place, unable to do anything but watch as they pushed her through the hallway doors. He snapped out of the daze as he remembered the twins still waiting in the car. He rushed outside again. Tori and Nicole sat close together, hands locked tightly between them. Both looked like they were trying not to cry, but failing a little more each second. "Come on," Joel said softly, opening the door for them. "She's inside. They're taking care of her." Nicole climbed out first, clutching his sleeve for just a second before letting go. Tori followed, straightening her shoulders like she didn't want anyone to think she was scared, even though her eyes told a different story. Inside, the girls stayed close to him as he guided them through the bustling waiting area toward the chairs near the double doors where Vernie had been taken. They sat down, and Joel knelt in front of them so he could speak without towering above them. "She's in good hands," he told them. "The doctors are moving fast. That's what you want in a situation like this." Nicole lifted her gaze slowly. "Is she going to wake up?" The question hit him somewhere deep. "They're going to do everything they can," he said, because he didn't dare make promises he couldn't keep. Tori leaned back slightly, her breath unsteady. "Why do you know where we live?" she asked, her voice more curious than accusing. "Mom never told us about you." He felt that question like a quiet blow. It landed in a place he had avoided for years. "We used to know each other," he answered carefully. "A long time ago." Tori frowned. But why didn't you come back? Nicole shot her a look, the kind siblings share when one of them asks something bold but necessary. Joel sat beside them, instead of kneeling, giving himself a moment to steady his thoughts. Sometimes adults make choices, he said, and those choices have consequences they never meant to create. He paused. I didn't know I needed to come back. Nicole tilted her head slightly, studying his face with the gentle seriousness she always carried. Because of us? The question cut through him with surprising precision. He nodded slowly. I didn't know anything about you, he admitted. Not until today. Tori blinked. So when we called, you didn't know who we were? No, he said. But I knew your mom needed help. That was enough. Nicole leaned back, her voice a soft whisper. You sound like you care about her. The honesty inside him slipped free again before he could stop it. I do. He glanced toward the hallway, where they had taken Vernay. More than I ever said out loud. Tori exhaled through her nose, something between a sigh and a release of tension. Mom never talked about anybody except us. That doesn't surprise me, he replied quietly. She always protected the people she loved. The girls exchanged a look, the kind siblings use when they're figuring something out together, but aren't ready to say it yet. Silence settled around them for a moment. The hospital noises continued, beeping machines, rolling carts, scattered conversations, but the three of them sat inside their own still moment, each holding on to their own thoughts. Joel checked the doors again, half expecting a doctor to walk through and give him news he wasn't emotionally prepared to hear. Tori's voice broke the silence. You looked scared when you saw Mom. He didn't deny it. I was. Nicole twisted her fingers together. Were you scared because she might not be okay? He nodded. Yes, or because of us, she added quietly. The question stunned him. Both, he said honestly. Seeing her like that, and seeing you too. It all hit me at once. Tori tapped her foot lightly, a nervous habit she didn't even notice. Why did our eyes make you look surprised? He froze for a second, not because he wanted to hide the truth, but because the truth was too big to drop in a moment already heavy with fear. I'll explain, he said gently. But right now, the most important thing is your mom. Both girls accepted that answer, even though curiosity still flickered behind their eyes. Joel leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The reality of everything happening pressed against him. Verney unconscious, the twins beside him, the past he had shut away now standing right in front of him with questions he wasn't ready for. He glanced at the door again. Please be okay, he whispered, so low the girls couldn't hear. A nurse passed by, calling for another patient. Someone complained about the wait. A doctor spoke in firm tones across the room, but none of it mattered to him or the children sitting beside him. All they could do was wait and hope the next person coming through those doors would tell them Verney was still fighting. The emergency room doors slid open again as Joel stepped inside with the twins close behind him. The bright lights stung their eyes for a moment, and the rush of movement hit them like a wave. Nurses moved quickly across the floor, patients groaned softly from plastic chairs, and the steady beeping of machines filled the space with a pulse that reminded everyone why they were there. A nurse gestured toward the registration desk. Sir, we need her information. Follow me. Joel turned to the girls. Stay right here where I can see you. Tori nodded, gripping Nicole's hand tightly. Nicole sat down slowly, curling her legs close as if trying to make herself smaller. Both of them looked shaken, but they remained alert, their eyes darting toward every sound that seemed too sharp or too close. Joel followed the nurse, still glancing back at the twins every few seconds. When he reached the desk, the woman behind it was already pulling up forms. We need her name and any medical history you know. Joel swallowed. Her name is Verney Danner. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. Relation? The woman asked without looking up. That simple question struck him harder than he expected. He hesitated, then answered carefully, Someone important to me. The woman finally looked at him. There was no judgment in her eyes, just an understanding that tonight wasn't the night to ask for complicated explanations. She nodded and continued typing. Does she have allergies? Medication? Conditions we should know about? Joel shook his head. I don't know all the details. We'll find out from the attending doctor, the woman said. Sign here. This allows us to begin treatment and run necessary tests. He picked up the pen but noticed the faint tremor in his hand. Still, he signed quickly because hesitation wasted time. He had always been decisive in business, but signing this form felt different. It wasn't a contract or a deal. It was trust. It was fear. It was a reminder that he wasn't ready to lose someone he never truly got over. When he returned to the waiting area, Tori stood up immediately. Did they say anything? Not yet, Joel answered. They're working on her. Nicole tugged on his sleeve. Is she hurting? They're helping her feel safe, he said gently. You did the right thing calling me. Nicole gave a small nod but didn't speak again. She pressed closer to her sister, her head resting lightly against Tori's shoulder. The waiting room filled with voices, some quiet, some tense, some exhausted. A grandmother whispered a prayer while holding her grandson's hand. A man paced back and forth, muttering to himself. 2 nurses walked quickly toward a room, discussing a patient's vitals. The space carried the emotional weight of dozens of stories happening at once. Tori looked around, absorbing the chaos with wide, observant eyes. Is the hospital always like this? She asked. Joel sat down beside them. Most nights, yes. People come here because they're scared and they need help. Nicole whispered. Like us. Exactly like you, Joel murmured. For a while, the 3 of them sat in quiet. The girls leaned into each other. Joel kept his posture tense, eyes fixed on the hallway where Vernie had disappeared moments earlier. Finally, Tori broke the silence. Why did Mom tell us to call you? Her voice wasn't accusing, but it was steady, filled with a kind of courage that came from fear mixing with curiosity. Joel inhaled slowly. He had expected the question, just not this soon, not while the air still carried the sting of panic. She trusted me, he said carefully. A long time ago. When? Tori pressed, her brows furrowing. He studied her face. She looked so much like Vernie when she wanted answers, strong, persistent, unwilling to accept vague explanations. When we were younger, he said, before a lot of things changed. Nicole lifted her head. Did you make her sad? The question wasn't sharp. It wasn't meant to hurt him. It was simply honest, too honest for a moment already heavy with tension. Joel didn't look away. Yes, he said softly. I did. Tori's shoulders stiffened. Why? Joel leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. I made a mistake that hurt her, and she didn't deserve that. Nicole blinked, thinking it over. Do you still care about her? The truth slipped out more easily than he expected. Yes, I never stopped. The twins exchanged a look, one of those silent conversations siblings have when they're trying to understand something too big for their age yet too important to ignore. A nurse approached then, her expression urgent but calm. Sir, we need you to sign an additional form for imaging. She's being moved to another room. Joel stood quickly. Show me. He followed the nurse down the hall, leaving the twins in the same chairs but within sight. She handed him another clipboard. He signed without hesitation, then asked, Is she waking up at all? We're monitoring her closely, the nurse replied. Right now, the priority is stabilizing her. He nodded, though each word felt like a weight added to his chest. When he returned to the twins, Nicole reached for his hand without thinking. Her small fingers wrapped around 2 of his. The simple gesture startled him, but he didn't pull away. Are they helping her? She asked. Yes, Joel said. They're doing everything they can. Tori exhaled deeply. I don't like waiting. I know, Joel replied. Waiting is the hardest part. They sat again, and for a moment the chaos of the hospital seemed distant. The girls leaned into him instinctively, 2 children who didn't understand why they felt safer near him, only that they did. Tori looked up at him again, her eyes sharper this time. Did you and Mom love each other? Joel felt the question settle deep inside him. He didn't flinch. He didn't deflect. Yes, he said. We did. Then why didn't you stay? The truth wasn't simple, but the moment demanded honesty. I made choices I wish I could undo, he said quietly. But I never stopped caring. The girls absorbed his words, their faces shifting through confusion, sadness, and something else, something almost like understanding. Before any of them could speak again, the nurse from earlier returned and called out, Mr. Gardell? Joel stood instantly. They're preparing her for further evaluation. We'll update you soon. Tori squeezed Nicole's hand. Nicole squeezed Joel's finger, and the night pressed forward, reshaping all of their lives. The minutes dragged forward with an ache that settled into the room like unwelcome company. Joel sat between the twins, watching the hallway as if his stare alone could force someone to bring news about Vernie. The waiting room was still busy, but the noise had faded into the background. All he heard clearly was the sound of the girls breathing softly beside him and the muted hum of a vending machine vibrating against the wall. Nicole leaned against his arm, resting her head there without asking permission. She looked exhausted, her eyelids heavy but refusing to close. Tori sat on his other side, her posture rigid, legs swinging nervously. She watched the double doors as if she expected her mother to appear suddenly. Joel tried to focus on the present, but the past kept rising without restraint. He remembered the night everything fell apart with Vernay. It had been late, the city lights glowing through her apartment window. She stood near the door, arms folded, fighting to keep her voice steady as she tried not to cry. He had been careless with something that mattered deeply to her. It wasn't betrayal in the way people usually mean it, but it was enough to make her feel unseen, unvalued, and unwelcome in his world. She told him she couldn't live in a space where she always felt like she was proving her worth. She told him she needed honesty, presence, and a kind of protection he hadn't understood yet. He remembered reaching for her hand, but she stepped back, shaking her head. He remembered her last sentence before she closed the door behind him. "I can't keep losing pieces of myself just to fit next to you." He didn't chase her. He told himself she needed space. He convinced himself she'd call. When she didn't, he let time widen the distance until 10 years slipped away. Now she was fighting for her life only a few rooms away, and he felt the weight of that decade like a stone pressed against his chest. He glanced at the twins again. Tori sat with her arms crossed tightly over her chest, tapping her foot on the tile in a quick, impatient rhythm. He noticed something familiar in that habit. He used to do the same thing when he was nervous during long meetings. His mother used to place a gentle hand on his knee and whisper, "Slow down, you're thinking too fast." Nicole shifted beside him, fidgeting with the loose thread on her sleeve. She tilted her head slightly when he looked at her, the same subtle gesture he made whenever he was concentrating on something. These little details made everything inside him tighten. It wasn't just their eye color. It was their expressions, their movements, their instincts. Pieces of him appeared in every gesture the girls made without realizing it. The truth was loud even in silence. Tori turned her head toward him suddenly. "Why do you keep looking at us like that?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Like what?" "Like you're trying to figure something out," she said plainly. Nicole lifted her head, curious now. "Are we making you uncomfortable?" "Not at all," Joel said quickly. "I'm just thinking about Mom." Nicole asked. "Yes," he replied, though he knew it wasn't the full truth. He was thinking about all three of them, about how he had walked through life oblivious to something that should have mattered more than anything. Tori leaned back, studying him. "You act like you know us." Joel looked at her gently. "Maybe it feels that way, because tonight has been intense for all of us." Nicole laid her hand on his arm. "You didn't leave us," she whispered. "You came. You didn't even know us, but you came right away." Her voice cracked slightly, and Joel felt something inside him shift. He placed his hand over hers, careful not to overwhelm her. "That's what you do when someone you care about needs help," he said. Tori let out a slow breath, her shoulders lowering just a little. "Mom doesn't really ask people for help," she said. "She always says she can handle things." Joel nodded. "She's always been strong, stronger than most people. But she still told us to call you," Nicole said, "even though she never told us why." "That means something," Tori added, watching him closely. Joel swallowed. They were right. Verney had kept his number stored for a reason. She could have deleted it. She could have erased every trace of him. But she didn't. Instead, she kept it under a label that carried memory and hesitation at the same time. Emergency contact, old, not forgotten, not forgiven, just kept. The twins grew quiet, and Joel felt the heaviness of their silence settle over him. He leaned back in his chair, letting his eyes drift across the room. Every corner of the hospital held its own story, but his focus stayed locked on the door that separated them from Verney. Nicole slid her hand back into his. "You're warm," she murmured. Mom's hands were cold. "She lost consciousness," Joel explained softly. "Sometimes that makes the body cool down." "Will they warm her up?" Nicole asked. "The doctors know what to do," Joel said. "She's not alone in there." Tori's voice cut through the moment. "Are you scared for her?" He turned toward her, and for once he didn't hide anything. "Yes." "Why?" she asked, not accusing, simply searching. He took a slow breath. "Because losing someone who once mattered never gets easier. Nicole rested her cheek against his arm again, trusting him in a way that felt too natural for how little time they'd known each other. "You don't feel like a stranger," she whispered. Her words struck him with unexpected force. Tori nodded slightly. "Yeah, you feel familiar." Joel didn't know how to answer, so he didn't. He let the truth sit in the space between them, unspoken yet unmistakable. The girls slowly leaned into him, Tori resting her shoulder against his side, Nicole curled lightly against his arm, and the shift was so natural that Joel didn't even think to question it. He simply let them stay. A set of footsteps approached from the hallway, steady and direct. Joel lifted his head immediately. The twins straightened beside him, bracing themselves. A doctor stepped into the waiting area, his expression solemn but focused, the kind of face accustomed to delivering hard truths. "Family of Vernay Danner?" he called. Nicole clutched Joel's sleeve. Tori stood quickly, her breath catching. "We're here," Joel said, rising to his feet with them. The doctor nodded once. "She's experiencing significant internal pressure around the brain. We believe a blood vessel is ruptured. We need to take her into emergency surgery right away." Nicole's body stiffened instantly. "Surgery?" she whispered, eyes filling. The doctor softened his tone but didn't avoid the truth. "This operation is serious. We'll do everything we can, but the risk is high. She'll need intervention immediately to relieve the pressure." Tori swallowed hard. "What happens if you don't do it?" "She could lose consciousness permanently," the doctor replied. "This is time-sensitive." Joel felt his own breath slow, as if the air had thickened. "What do you need from me?" "We need a signature to authorize the procedure," the doctor said. "Are you able to sign on her behalf?" The question weighed on him, heavier than he expected. He looked at the twins before answering. Their eyes were glassy, searching for reassurance. "Yes," he said firmly. "Give me the paperwork." The doctor handed him a clipboard. Joel took it, and for a moment, his hand hovered above the line. Signing this didn't bind him legally in any permanent sense, but emotionally, it felt like he was stepping into a role he had unknowingly abandoned years ago. Still, he pressed his pen to the paper and wrote his name with slow, deliberate strokes. The doctor nodded. "We'll update you when she's in recovery." He turned to leave, then paused. The fact that she made it here quickly gives her a better chance. It wasn't comfort, but it was something. When the doctor disappeared through the hallway doors, Nicole began to cry softly. Joel crouched down, placing a hand on her shoulder. "She's strong," he said gently. "Your mom has been strong her whole life. She's fighting right now." Nicole nodded, but the fear remained etched across her face. Tori held her sister close. "We're staying here, right?" "Yes," Joel said. "We're not going anywhere." They settled back into their seats. The waiting room lights buzzed faintly in the background. Every few minutes a nurse walked by, and each time the twins straightened as if expecting news. But no one came yet. Joel leaned back, exhaling slowly. The weight of the night pressed against him, but beneath the fear was something else, an emerging certainty he hadn't allowed himself to consider. He looked at the twins, really looked at them. Nicole curled against Tori's arm, her lashes damp from crying. Tori sat upright, holding her sister tightly, even though her own eyes looked exhausted. Their breaths synced in a way siblings often shared without realizing it. He couldn't deny it anymore. The resemblance wasn't just in their eyes. It was in their expressions, their habits, their small instinctive movements. He could trace pieces of himself in the way Tori tapped her foot and the way Nicole tilted her head. Every detail stitched together a truth that felt both overwhelming and painfully clear. He had daughters he had never met, daughters who had grown up without him, daughters who were now leaning against him for comfort, without even knowing why doing so felt natural. Minutes turned into the slow crawl of an hour. Nicole started to drift first, her body relaxing as exhaustion pulled her downward. Her head rested on Joel's arm without hesitation. He didn't move, afraid of disturbing her. Tori lasted longer, staring at the door with fierce determination until fatigue finally reached her too. Her body leaned sideways against Joel's shoulder. At first, she tried to straighten herself, but sleep caught her before she could adjust. Joel found himself sitting perfectly still, one arm supporting Nicole, the other allowing Tori's weight to settle against him. Their quiet breathing filled the space around him, steady, innocent, trusting. He looked down at them, two lives connected to him in ways he still struggled to understand. A quiet ache built in his chest, equal parts guilt and awe. He had missed their first steps, their first words, their birthdays, their milestones. He had missed everything that mattered, not because he chose to ignore them, but because he never knew they existed. A knot formed in his throat. He leaned his head slightly toward them, letting the truth settle clearly for the first time. "They're mine," he whispered. The words weren't loud. They weren't dramatic. They came out soft, almost fragile, yet filled with a depth he hadn't expected. Saying it out loud made something inside him shift permanently. These weren't just children caught in a crisis. They were part of his life, part of his past he didn't know he had, part of his future he hadn't planned for but couldn't imagine walking away from now. Around them, the waiting room carried on with the usual noise of medical urgency, but the three of them existed in a small pocket of stillness. Joel rested his free hand gently over Tori's arm, a quiet promise forming inside him. He wasn't leaving. Not this time. Not when the cost of absence had already been far too high. The hallway doors remained closed, but for the first time since the night began, Joel felt centered, not calm, not relieved, but anchored by the sudden clarity of who he needed to be. A man who showed up, a man who stayed, a man who didn't run from the truth. He glanced at the twins once more, their faces peaceful in sleep. "They're mine," he whispered again, steadier this time. And as he waited for news about Vernie, he accepted a reality he couldn't unsee. Everything in his life had just changed. The double doors finally swung open after what felt like an endless stretch of hours. The doctor who had taken Vernie into surgery stepped out, removing his gloves as he approached Joel and the twins. His expression carried the strain of the night, but there was a quiet steadiness in his posture. Tori shot to her feet instantly. Nicole grabbed Joel's arm, holding on tightly as if bracing herself for whatever was about to be said. The doctor stopped in front of them. "The surgery is complete," he began. Joel felt the air tighten around him. He didn't blink. The doctor continued, "We were able to stop the bleeding and relieve the pressure. She's stable for now, but the next day will be important. She may wake up slowly. She may need time. Her body has been through a lot." Nicole's breath cracked. "So she's alive?" "Yes," the doctor said gently. "She's alive." Those words softened the edges of the fear that had been holding all three of them hostage. Tori wiped her eyes quickly, trying to hide how close she had been to breaking again. "Can we see her?" Joel asked. "She's being moved to recovery. One guardian at a time," the doctor replied. Then he looked at the girls. "But since you're minors and she's your mother, you can go in together with him for a short while." Tori nodded immediately. Nicole didn't speak. She just held Joel's sleeve tighter. The nurse led them down the hallway, the quiet hum of medical machines filling the space as they passed several rooms. Joel walked with the girls sandwiched between him and the nurse, his steps slow and deliberate. He wanted to rush, but part of him feared what he would see when they reached her. They turned into a dimmer room near the end of the hall. The curtain was partially drawn. Inside, Vernie lay still, a blanket pulled up to her chest. A bandage wrapped the side of her head. Her breathing was steady, slow, quiet. Machines monitored every rhythm, casting soft beeps into the room. Nicole let out a shaky exhale the moment she saw her mother's chest rise and fall. She rushed toward the bedside and placed her hand on Vernie's arm. "Mommy," she whispered, a sound blended with relief and aching tenderness. Tori moved to the other side, gripping the bed rail as if afraid her mother would slip away again. She leaned in, speaking softly. "We're here, Mom. We're not leaving." Joel remained at the doorway for a few seconds. He had imagined this moment 100 different ways during the waiting hours, but none prepared him for the sight of her so still, so vulnerable. A wave of regret hit him, heavier and more precise than before. Regret for the years lost, the apologies never spoken, the chances wasted. He stepped closer. Vernie's face looked softer than he remembered, free of the tension she carried every day. Her curls were scattered across the pillow, framing her head like a memory from a time when life between them felt possible. Joel pulled a chair closer and sat down, his posture heavy with everything he couldn't say out loud. The twins clung to the bedside rails, whispering her name every few minutes, hoping for even the smallest stir of movement. Minutes stretched quietly. Eventually, exhaustion crept through the girls' bodies again. Nicole fought sleep the longest, her head dipping forward several times before she finally curled into the small couch near the wall. Tori stayed upright longer, insisting on keeping her hand on her mother's arm, but even her determined strength couldn't outrun fatigue. She leaned her head against the mattress, eyes fluttering shut. Joel watched them both, his heart pressing firmly against a truth he was still learning how to stand inside. He stood slowly and moved to adjust Tori so her neck wouldn't strain. She murmured something unintelligible but didn't wake. He took the folded blanket from the chair's back and draped it gently across both girls. When he finally sat back down beside Verney, his body sagged from the emotional weight of the night. He rested his elbows on his knees and leaned forward, his fingers interlaced loosely as he breathed out a long, heavy exhale. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't empty. It was loaded with everything unspoken between him and the woman lying unconscious in front of him. The years apart flickered in his mind like scenes from a life he barely recognized anymore. He whispered quietly, even though he knew she couldn't respond. "I'm here, Verney. I'm not leaving you again." A nurse entered quietly to check the monitors, nodding at Joel with a look that suggested she understood this moment mattered far more than her routine tasks. She left silently, drawing the curtain back just enough to keep the room dim and private. The quiet settled again. Joel leaned back in his chair and let his eyes drift between Verney and the twins. Seeing the three of them in the same room made something deep inside him shift, something he hadn't expected to feel tonight, something he didn't know how to name yet. He watched Tori's chest rise and fall, her hand still resting on the edge of the blanket that covered her mother's arm. Nicole slept curled in a small ball, her face pressed into the fabric of the couch cushion. Their presence filled the room with a kind of fragile peace. At some point, Joel's own exhaustion caught up with him. He rested his head back against the stiff hospital chair, his eyes closing slowly. Even as sleep dragged him down, he kept one hand resting near Verney's arm, as if making sure she didn't drift away again. Minutes passed, then an hour. The three of them, Joel, Tori, and Nicole, slept in quiet positions of worry and hope around Verney's bed. And for the first time in 10 years, a family that never got a real beginning found themselves sharing the same space, breathing the same air, held together by fear, truth, and the delicate thread of possibility. A faint rustle stirred the quiet of the recovery room. At first it was so soft that it blended into the distant beeping of machines and the muted sounds drifting from the hallway. But then Verney's fingers twitched again, more noticeably this time, curling slightly against the blanket. Nicole shifted on the couch, still asleep. Tori remained slumped against the side of the bed, her hand lightly touching her mother's arm. Joel sat in the chair closest to Verney, dozing in a half-sleep, his chin dipped toward his chest. Another movement. This time Verney's brow tightened. Her breath dragged in deeper, uneven, and slow. Joel's eyes snapped open. He leaned forward instantly, his entire body tense with alertness. "Verney," he whispered, barely trusting his voice. Her eyelids fluttered, slow, heavy, as if weighed down by more than exhaustion. Her vision was blurry at first, nothing but shapes and shadows. She blinked again. Then again. The world sharpened. The first face she saw was his. Joel. For a moment, confusion paralyzed her expression. Her lips parted slightly as she tried to understand why the man she had spent a decade avoiding was sitting inches from her bed. Her breathing picked up, shallow and uneven. Joel raised his hands slightly, palms open, as if calming a frightened animal. "You're okay," he whispered. "You made it through surgery. The doctors said you're stable." Her eyes widened, not with comfort, but with something closer to dread. She tried to push herself up, wincing as a sharp pain shot through her head. The movement startled Tori awake. "Mom?" Tori's voice cracked as she sat up quickly. "Mom, you're awake." Nicole jolted awake at the sound and scrambled off the couch, rushing toward the bed before she fully registered her mother's consciousness. "Mommy," she cried, but Verney didn't reach for them immediately. Her gaze stayed locked on Joel. Her face shifted from groggy confusion to sharp emotional whiplash. She blinked hard, and her voice came out strained, raw from dryness and fear. What are you doing here?" The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. The sharpness cut the air with enough force to make Joel flinch. He kept his voice low, steady, refusing to escalate her panic. "You collapsed. The girls called me." Her breath hitched again. She turned her head slowly toward the twins, who were now leaning over her, touching her shoulders, her arms, her hands, trying to ground themselves in her presence. You called him?" she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief and something unspoken beneath it. Tori nodded quickly. "We didn't know what else to do. Your phone had his number saved for emergencies. You told us to use it." Verney shut her eyes briefly, fighting a wave of emotion that tightened her jaw. Her voice trembled. "You shouldn't have come." Joel felt the sentence hit him square in the chest. He inhaled quietly, but didn't look away. "I came because you needed help," he said softly. "And because they needed someone who could get here fast." Nicole's bottom lip quivered. "Mommy, please don't be mad." At that, Vernie's expression softened slightly. She reached weakly for Nicole's cheek, brushing her skin with trembling fingers. "I'm not mad, baby. I'm just surprised and tired." Tori leaned closer. "Are you hurting? Do you need something?" "I'm okay," Vernie whispered. "I just need a moment." But she wasn't okay. Not emotionally. She turned to Joel again, eyes sharp with confusion and fear. There was history in that gaze. History that hadn't healed. History that had never been spoken about since the day she walked away. "You shouldn't be here," she said again, quieter but firmer this time. Joel's voice softened even further. "I understand why you'd feel that way, but the girls needed someone. They did the right thing." Vernie swallowed hard. The heart monitor beside her ticked steadily, but her own chest felt unsteady, rising and falling with tension she wasn't prepared for. Tori glanced between them. "Why are you two talking like this? Do you know each other?" Nicole looked confused too. "Mom, who is he?" Vernie closed her eyes briefly, pain and panic clashing beneath her ribs. She wasn't ready for this conversation. Not here, not now, not while machines hummed beside her and the world felt fragile. Joel sensed her spiraling fear and lowered his voice even more. "You don't have to explain anything right now. Just focus on breathing." His tone wasn't forceful. It wasn't demanding. It held concern, layered with memories he didn't have the right to show but couldn't hide. But his gentleness didn't calm her. It made something inside her crack open. Her voice shook. "I didn't want them calling you." Tori pulled back slightly at the sting in her tone. Nicole's eyes filled with confusion. "We thought we were doing the right thing." "You were," Joel said immediately, stepping in before Vernie could respond with more fear than intention. "You absolutely were." Vernie let her head fall back against the pillow, tears gathering at the edges of her eyes. She didn't let them fall, but they glistened in the dim light. "I wasn't ready for this," she whispered. Joel nodded. "I know." The twins stood frozen between them, caught in a moment far bigger than they understood. But their instincts pulled them back to the one person they felt safest with, their mother. They leaned in again, touching her arms, wiping tears she hadn't realized had slipped down her cheeks. "Mom," Tori said softly, her voice trembling with fear and love. "We thought we lost you." Nicole nodded, her voice barely audible. "We were so scared." Vernie looked at them, really looked at them, and her expression broke open with emotion that drowned everything else out. She cupped the back of Nicole's head with one hand, held Tori's wrist with the other. "My babies, I'm here," she whispered. "I'm here." Joel looked away, giving them the moment. He stared at the floor, jaw tight, heart loud inside him. But even as he looked away, he heard Vernie's quiet breath, felt the tension in the room, felt the shift. She was awake. She was hurting. And nothing between them would remain hidden much longer. For a moment the room stilled again, as if everything inside it had paused to catch its breath. The machines hummed quietly, the hallway sounds softened, and the weight of 10 years hovered over the bed like a storm waiting to release its first drop. Vernie turned her head slowly, looking straight at Joel. Her expression held exhaustion, confusion, and something deeper, pain with edges still sharp from the past. Her voice was soft, but carried a tremor that revealed more than her words. "Why did they have your number, Joel?" Tori looked at her mother, then at him, sensing something heavy beneath the question. Nicole straightened a little, gripping the blanket near her mother's hand. Joel didn't rush his answer. He sat upright, leaning slightly forward, his hands relaxed but steady. "You gave it to them," he said quietly. "You saved it under a name they didn't understand." Her jaw tightened. The truth stung more than she wanted to admit. "I shouldn't have," she whispered. "I never meant for them to call you." Tori blinked. "Why not? He helped us." Nicole nodded, her voice small but firm. "He came right away. He didn't even know us." Vernie looked at her daughters, and her expression softened only for them. "I know, baby. I know he helped. I'm grateful you're both safe. But calling him, it wasn't supposed to happen." Joel's breath caught slightly, but he didn't look away. He knew the moment was coming. He sensed what she was trying to avoid. Tori crossed her arms, frustration rising. So you didn't want him to help us? You wanted us to wait and hope someone else came? No, Vernay answered quickly, shaking her head weakly. Of course not. I wanted you safe. I wanted you cared for. I just didn't want... She paused, struggling to find the right words. I didn't want this. Nicole leaned closer. This what? Vernay shut her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, the tears she tried to contain finally slipped free. I didn't want him involved in your lives. Why? Tori asked bluntly, her voice cracking. Why wouldn't you want someone who actually showed up? The question hit Vernay harder than she expected. She looked away, unable to answer immediately. Joel remained silent, letting the twins speak. Their voices belonged here more than his did. Nicole touched her mother's arm gently. Mom, he wasn't mean to us. He didn't yell. He didn't get annoyed. He held my hand when I cried. Vernay's face twisted with emotion. That's not the point, sweetheart. Then what is? Tori pressed. Vernay drew a shaky breath. Her voice wavered. I didn't want you loving someone who could hurt you the way he hurt me. The room tightened. Tori froze, stunned by how raw the confession sounded. Nicole's eyes widened, her fingers curling slightly against the blanket. Joel's chest tightened. He kept his voice low, steady. Vernay. She shook her head quickly. Don't. Just don't speak yet. The girls looked between them, trying to understand a truth that had been shielded from them their entire lives. Nicole whispered, Did he do something bad? Vernay hesitated. She wasn't ready for the full conversation, not in this hospital bed, not moments after waking from surgery. But her daughters deserved something real, something that wasn't fear wrapped in silence. He hurt my heart, she said. And when someone does that, when someone breaks you in a way you never expected, it changes how you protect the people you love. Tori narrowed her eyes slightly, trying to match her mother's hurt with the man sitting across from them. Did he say sorry? Joel spoke before he could stop himself. Not until now, he admitted. And not the way she deserved. Vernay didn't look at him, but her breathing hitched. Nicole asked softly, But if he's sorry, why can't he be around us? Vernay finally faced them. Because sorry doesn't erase harm, baby. And I didn't want either of you depending on someone who might disappear. We called him, Tori said. He didn't disappear. I know, Vernay whispered. And that scares me too. The honesty stunned the room into silence. Joel inhaled slowly. Vernay, you don't have to trust me. I understand why you don't. But the girls... He looked at them, then back at her. They did what you raised them to do. They reached for help. I wanted them reaching for someone safe, she said. Nicole looked up at him. He feels safe. The statement struck everyone at once. Even Tori nodded. Yeah, I don't know why, but he does. Vernay shut her eyes again, overwhelmed. Girls, please. Joel leaned just slightly forward. He didn't touch her. He didn't raise his voice. Vernay, please understand something. I'm not here to take anything from you. I came because they called me, because you needed someone. Nothing more. She opened her eyes slowly, meeting his. There was old hurt in her gaze. Old disappointment. Old fear. But there was something else too. Uncertainty about what came next. Her voice softened, though the edge never fully left. I didn't want them hurt the way you hurt me. It was not loud. It was not sharp. It was simply true. Tori reached for her mother's hand again. Mom, we're not him, and he didn't hurt us. Nicole added quietly, he didn't leave. He stayed. Vernay looked at her daughters, their expressions full of worry, love, and innocence wrapped around a truth they didn't fully grasp. She whispered, I know. Joel lowered his eyes, guilt and longing pressing inside him with equal force. The truth had finally cracked open. But it was only the beginning of everything that still needed to be faced. The room settled into a heavy stillness after Vernay's last words. The tension didn't dissolve, it simply lingered in the space between all four of them, waiting to be addressed properly, completely, without the shortcuts she had relied on for years. Vernay looked away from Joel and toward the quiet machines beside her bed. Her face softened, not because the hurt had lightened, but because she was too tired to keep holding up the armor she'd worn for so long. Tori sat at the edge of her bed, still gripping her mother's hand. Nicole hovered close to her sister, eyes darting from her mother to Joel with a mixture of worry and rising curiosity. Joel didn't move. He didn't try to step closer. He simply waited, his expression open, steady, and painfully remorseful. Vernie took a long breath, wincing at the tightness in her head. Girls, I need you to listen carefully. Both of you. Tori nodded. Nicole did too, though she looked nervous. Joel stayed silent, sensing this wasn't his moment to speak. Vernie swallowed hard before beginning. The reason I left, the reason I never told him anything, wasn't simple. It wasn't just one thing. It was a lot of things piling up inside me until I couldn't see a future that didn't break me. The weight of her words drew the twins in closer. I didn't grow up in the kind of world he did, she continued softly. We came from different places, different expectations. When I was with him, sometimes I felt like I was stepping into rooms where people could see right through me, like no matter what I wore or how I spoke, I didn't belong. Joel's jaw tightened, not to defend himself, but because he recognized the truth in her voice. I tried, she said quietly. I tried so hard to fit into his world. But those rooms, those people, they made me feel small, and I started believing that I wasn't enough for the life he wanted. Tori frowned. Mom, you're enough for anyone. Vernie smiled weakly. You say that because you love me, but I didn't feel that way back then. She turned her gaze toward the window, her eyelids fluttering with the strain of old memories resurfacing. There were events, dinners, gatherings, moments where I felt like I had to shrink myself to be accepted. I always felt watched, judged. Joel's fingers curled slightly, but he kept still. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer excuses. He listened like a man finally willing to hear everything he once ignored. And I was scared, she whispered. Scared of raising children in a world where they'd be treated differently depending on which parent they were standing next to. Scared of them feeling too black for some rooms and not black enough for others. Scared of everything I grew up afraid of repeating itself. Nicole's brow furrowed. Mom, you thought we'd be treated badly? I thought the world would try to make you feel misplaced, she said softly. And I didn't want that for you. Her voice wavered. But the biggest reason... She hesitated, her eyes glazing with tears. The biggest reason was the night he broke my trust. Joel closed his eyes briefly, regret carving itself deeper into his features. You promised me honesty, she said. You promised me partnership, and then you hid something important from me, something that made me question everything about us. The girls looked between them, not fully understanding but sensing the pain underneath. It wasn't something unforgivable, she admitted, but it was something that made me realize if he could break my trust once, he could break it again. And I couldn't risk that, not with a heart that had already been bruised by life more times than I ever admitted, and not with the future I didn't even know I was carrying inside me. Joel finally spoke, his voice soft, controlled. Vernie, I know I failed you, and I have lived with that every day. She didn't interrupt him, but she didn't soften either. When I found out I was pregnant, she continued quietly, I panicked. I thought about what kind of life they'd have, who they'd become, and the idea of them growing up with a father who might disappoint them the way you disappointed me. She shook her head slowly. I couldn't let that happen. Tori blinked hard. So, you left because you thought he would hurt us? I left, Vernie said, because I couldn't risk the heartbreak I barely survived happening to you too. Nicole moved closer to her mother's shoulder, resting her cheek lightly against it. But you didn't even give him a chance to know us, she whispered. Tears slipped down Vernie's temples. I know, she whispered back, and that decision has haunted me every single day. Joel leaned slightly forward, not enough to intrude, but enough to show he was present. Fully, painfully present. I never defended myself back then, he said quietly. I didn't chase you. I didn't fight for us the way I should have, but every word you're saying, it's true. I was young. I was selfish. I was stupid. And I hurt you. Vernie looked at him with eyes that held 10 years of unspoken wounds. Joel continued, but I didn't know about them. I swear to you, if I had known, if I had even suspected, everything would have been different. Vernie closed her eyes, exhausted by truth, but finally relieved to let it out. Joel added softly, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for the chance to do better now. The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't heavy with avoidance. It was heavy with truth. Truth Vernie had carried alone for too long. The twins looked between their mother and Joel, sensing the shift. This was the first time the past had been spoken aloud. And for the first time, the future didn't feel as impossible. The room settled into an uneasy quiet after Vernie finished speaking. a quiet thick with emotions that had been buried, ignored, or misunderstood for a decade. Joel remained seated, his hands clasped loosely in front of him, his posture neither defensive nor closed. He looked like a man absorbing truth he had needed to hear, even if it was painful. Tori glanced between both adults, her brows knitted. Nicole moved slightly closer to the foot of the bed, her fingers gripping the railing nervously. They sensed that whatever came next would not be easy, but it was necessary. Joel inhaled slowly. Vernee, I can't undo what happened back then. And I won't pretend I didn't fail you. I did. But there's something you need to understand. He looked directly at her, his voice steady but layered with ache. If I'd known you were pregnant, I would have fought for them, and for you. Everything would have changed. Her expression tightened, not with disbelief, but with the pain of imagining a life that never happened. I couldn't take that chance, she whispered. I was already breaking when I walked away. Joel's jaw flexed, sorrow building behind his eyes. You walking away felt like a final sentence. I thought you didn't want anything to do with me anymore. I didn't want to depend on someone capable of hurting me, she said. Even unintentionally. He nodded. I understand that now. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. The twins exchanged another glance, one filled with questions neither of them dared to ask yet. But their silence didn't last long. Nicole took a small step closer to her mother. But Mom, why didn't you tell him after we were born? Vernee's face softened as she reached out weakly to touch her daughter's arm. Because I didn't trust that he could stay, and I didn't want either of you growing up waiting for someone who might not show up. Tori frowned. But he did show up. Tonight, he did. That's what scares me, Vernee admitted, her voice cracking. Seeing him here, caring, helping, it's the kind of thing that makes you hope for something dangerous. Joel's breath caught at that. Hope isn't dangerous, Vernee. Not for you, she replied. For me, hope has always been a door to disappointment. The twins absorbed that quietly. Joel leaned forward slightly. I spent 10 years pretending the life I built was enough. But every time I looked at the future, something felt missing. I didn't know what it was. Now I do. Nicole tilted her head. Us. His voice softened. Yes, you. And her. Vernee's gaze flickered, a brief flash of vulnerability crossing her features before she steadied herself again. I lived with that emptiness every day, Joel continued. You think I wouldn't have tried? You think I wouldn't have fought for a place in their lives if I had known? He shook his head gently, regret in every movement. I would have fought harder than I've ever fought for anything. Tori studied him closely. Why didn't you look for Mom after she left? Joel's face tightened. I tried, but she made it impossible. She changed numbers, moved, cut ties with everyone we knew together. I thought she wanted distance. I didn't know she was protecting something bigger than both of us. Vernee looked at the ceiling, not denying it. I didn't want him finding us by accident, she admitted. Not before I figured out how to raise you on my terms. Nicole whispered. On your terms? Yes, Vernee said. I wanted you growing up proud of who you were, grounded, not judged, not compared, and not treated like you were living between two worlds. Tori's voice softened. We would have figured it out. Her mother's eyes filled again. Maybe. But I didn't want your identity shaped by wealth or status or anyone's expectations except mine. I wanted to raise you in a place where your worth wasn't tied to someone else's name. Joel lowered his gaze, absorbing the depth of her protection. I understand your fear, Vernee, truly, but the choice shouldn't have been yours alone. That sentence hung in the air. Tori's brows drew together. So you both made choices, without telling us anything? Neither adult responded immediately. Nicole's voice came out small but clear. We didn't even know you two knew each other. Vernee exhaled shakily. I know. And I'm sorry. I was trying to do what I thought was best. For who? Tori asked. For us? Or for you? The question hit harder than either adult expected. Vernee looked down at her blanket, guilt folding across her features. Both, she whispered. I wanted to protect you, and I wanted to protect myself. Joel didn't speak. He let her finish the thought. I was afraid you'd grow up loving him, she continued quietly, and then watching him drift away the moment his world became too busy or too complicated. I couldn't risk your hearts breaking because of a decision I made. Nicole squeezed her hand gently. But you can't protect us from everything, Mom. Tori nodded. Especially not from the truth. Their words weren't sharp. They were simply true in a way only children could voice without hesitation. Joel finally spoke again, his tone calm but direct. "Vernay, the girls deserve honesty now. They're old enough to understand more than you think." Vernay looked at her daughters, then at Joel. Her chest rose in a slow, shuddering breath. "And they're starting to put the pieces together," Joel added softly. Both twins turned toward him, confusion deepening in their expressions. Nicole frowned slightly. "Pieces of what?" Tori studied him even harder. "Yeah, what pieces?" Joel didn't answer yet. He waited, giving Vernay space to choose whether to step forward or retreat. But her silence told him, and the girls, that she wasn't ready. Not yet. The truth hovered, ready to break open. And the twins knew something big was hiding between every sentence that had been spoken. The silence that followed felt heavier than any words spoken so far. It wasn't avoidance anymore. It was anticipation, the kind that builds when everyone in the room knows something important is coming, but no one is sure how to approach it without breaking something delicate. Joel took a slow breath. "Vernay isn't the only one who's been carrying something real," he said, his voice softer now. "I need to say my part too." The twins turned toward him. Vernay looked reluctant, unsure she wanted the weight of his truth added to the moment, but Joel continued, his words steady and deliberate. "These past 10 years, people see success when they look at my life. Buildings, deals, headlines, everything polished, everything controlled. But none of it meant anything at night." His hands tightened slightly in his lap. "Every evening, when everything got quiet, I felt it, the emptiness, the gap, the place where something should have been." He looked down for a moment, as if staring into the years he'd lost. "I didn't know what I was missing, not exactly. I had a sense of it, a feeling that my life was incomplete, but I didn't know what I was grieving until tonight." Nicole leaned closer, her brows drawn. "What were you grieving?" Joel lifted his gaze to meet hers. "A family I didn't know I lost." Vernay blinked, struck by the sincerity in his tone. She didn't interrupt. Joel continued. "I spent a decade building a world that felt hollow. I kept thinking it was because of work pressure or the responsibilities that come with it. But it wasn't that. It was the absence. The silence." His voice thickened slightly. "It was the feeling that somewhere out there were pieces of me I never got the chance to meet." Tori swallowed, staring at him like she was studying every word. "I didn't look for you because I thought I didn't deserve another chance," Joel said. "I thought if you wanted me gone, then maybe I should stay gone. I didn't know I was staying away from more than just you." Nicole shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "You mean us?" Joel nodded softly. "Yes." Vernay looked away, her breathing uneven. She wasn't angry now. She was overwhelmed. Everything she'd shielded her daughters from, everything she'd buried within herself, everything she believed she was protecting them from. It was all unraveling in front of her. Tori let out a slow exhale. "So, none of you thought we deserved the truth?" The room froze. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply a statement of clarity, spoken by a girl smarter than her age and braver than most adults in the room. Vernay's eyes widened. "Tori." "No." Tori shook her head, jaw tightening. "You kept secrets because you were scared. And you," she turned toward Joel, her voice firm but not cruel, "you didn't try hard enough to understand why she left. And we're the ones who never got a choice." Nicole's eyes filled with sudden tears at her sister's honesty. She reached for Tori's hand but didn't look away from the adults. Tori continued, "We should have known something. Anything. You didn't have to tell us everything, but you didn't tell us anything." Her words carried no disrespect, only disappointment, the kind that slices deeper because it comes from someone young, someone who deserved better. Vernay's throat tightened. "Baby, I was trying to protect you." "From what?" Tori asked. "From knowing we came from him?" Joel winced, but he didn't respond. He respected her right to speak. Nicole stepped closer to the bed, her voice small but piercing. "Mom, we look like him." Vernay's breath caught. "We act like him too," Nicole said. "Even before tonight. We always wondered why certain things we didn't match you." The room exhaled, as if it understood the significance of those words. Tori took a shaky breath. "We always felt like something didn't add up." She looked at Joel again. But tonight, everything started making sense. Silence fell again, only this time it wasn't fear holding it together. It was clarity. Nicole slowly turned back to her mother, her voice trembling. "Mom, Vernie braced herself, though she had no space left to hide emotionally. Nicole took a small step closer to Joel, then looked back at her mother. "Is he our dad?" The question landed with quiet force. Joel froze, breath locked inside him. He didn't dare speak. He didn't dare move. He waited, almost painfully, for Vernie's response. Vernie's chest rose sharply. Her heartbeat thudded audibly on the monitor beside her. Her fingers curled slightly against the blanket. Panic flickered across her face, not the kind that comes from confusion or denial, but the kind that comes from truth pressing too hard, too fast, too soon. "Nicole," she breathed, her voice shaking. Nicole's eyes filled. "Mom, just tell us." Vernie shut her eyes, a tear slipping out despite her effort to hold it back. The room seemed to shrink around her, every wall closing in as the moment she'd spent 10 years avoiding finally demanded a place at her bedside. She opened her eyes slowly, torn between fear and the inevitability of honesty. Before she answered, Joel whispered, barely audible, but enough for her to hear, "Let them have the truth, Vernie." Her breath trembled again. Tori and Nicole stared at her, two hearts bracing themselves for a sentence that would change everything. And Vernie, very clearly, began to break inside. The truth hovered on her lips, but she couldn't say it. Not yet. The tension rose sharply, filling every corner of the room with the weight of the answer she could no longer avoid. Joel felt the tension in the room tightening around Vernie like a rope she couldn't breathe through. Her eyes had widened, her pulse monitor had begun to beep faster, and her breaths had grown uneven. Even without a doctor present, he knew pushing her further right now would do more harm than good. He raised his hands slightly in a calm gesture. "Let's give your mom a moment," he said softly. "She just woke up. She needs space." Vernie shut her eyes as if grateful for the escape, but her trembling exhale betrayed how cornered she felt. She couldn't handle the truth, not with all eyes on her, not when her body was already fighting to stay steady after surgery. Tori looked uncertain. Nicole looked scared, but both girls nodded at Joel's suggestion. With gentle guidance, he led the twins toward the hallway. Neither resisted. The door clicked softly behind them, muting the steady beep of the machines and the fragile breaths of the woman inside. Out in the corridor, the lighting felt harsher, the cold tile grounding and unforgiving. A nurse walked by quickly, pushing a cart, but the hallway itself felt like a quiet tunnel separating them from the truth that had been building all night. Tori folded her arms the moment they stopped walking. "I want the real answer now." Nicole clung to her sister's sleeve, her voice thin. "Please, just tell us." Joel inhaled slowly. He leaned back against the wall, not to distance himself, but to steady himself. He had prepared for a lot in his life, hostile boardrooms, public scrutiny, high-stakes negotiations, but he had never prepared for this. 2 children looking up at him, with the kind of hope that could break a man if he mishandled it. He crouched so he was eye level with them. "Tori, Nicole." His voice held weight, gentleness, and truth pressed together. "I'm not going to lie to you." Nicole's breath hitched. Tori swallowed hard, bracing. Joel continued, "I believe I am your father." Both girls froze. Nicole's eyes filled instantly. Tori's lips parted slightly as though the air had been knocked from her chest. Joel didn't touch them, didn't pull them close or reach for their hands, because he understood something important. This moment wasn't about his need to connect. It was about their need to process. "But," he added softly, "I can't confirm it by myself. Your mom has to be the one who tells you the final truth." Tori's voice cracked. "Why? You're right here. She's right there. Why does this have to be complicated?" Joel exhaled slowly. "Because the truth belongs to all of us, and your mom has carried it alone for a long time. She deserves the chance to say it in her own words." Nicole blinked hard. "So you're not saying yes, but you're not saying no either." "I'm saying," Joel replied, "that everything inside me tells me the answer is yes, but your mom deserves a space to speak before anyone else decides for her." Tori kicked lightly at the floor in frustration. "I don't understand why adults make everything confusing." Joel nodded. "Sometimes adults protect people the wrong way, even when they think they're helping." Nicole wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. "But if you're our dad, did you want us?" The question pierced him harder than he expected. His voice lowered, raw and honest. "I didn't know about you, not even a hint, but if I had, I would have wanted you every day of your lives." A small trembling sound escaped Nicole's throat. a mixture of relief and heartbreak. Tori didn't cry, but her jaw tightened, and her breathing turned shallow. Why didn't she tell you? Joel shook his head. That's her story to explain, not mine. The twins looked toward the recovery room door. The truth didn't scare them now. It pulled at them, begged to be known. But before they could say anything else, a faint noise made all three of them turn. The door, the one Joel had gently closed, had not fully latched. It sat barely ajar, and through the small opening, Vernie's face was visible, pale, exhausted, eyes wide, tears sliding silently down her temples as she lay turned toward the gap. She had heard everything, every word. Her breathing hitched, the rise and fall of her chest uneven. She didn't call out. She didn't interrupt. She simply lay there absorbing the moment she had feared for 10 years, the moment her daughters finally stepped into a truth she could no longer hold back. Joel stood slowly. Tori froze. Nicole covered her mouth with her hand. None of them knew what to say. A nurse passed by with a chart and paused, sensing tension but deciding not to intrude. The hallway went quiet again. Then the softest sound reached them. Girls. Vernie's voice, cracked and thin, pushed through the barely open door. Come here. Nicole's head jerked up. Tori stood straighter. Joel stepped aside so they could move. But Vernie wasn't finished. Her voice steadied only enough to whisper the next part. And, Joel, you too. It was not an invitation. It was not forgiveness. It was surrender, of silence, of secrecy, of the emotional burden that had hollowed her for a decade. The truth she had been terrified to face had finally caught up to her, and she no longer had the strength or the desire to run from it. The door creaked open wider as Tori and Nicole stepped inside first, their steps small and hesitant. Joel followed behind them, slower, uncertain about how close he should stand. The room seemed quieter than before, as if even the machine sensed something fragile was about to unfold. Vernie was lying slightly elevated now, her hand resting weakly near the blanket. Her eyes were red from tears, but her expression held something different. Resolve. A trembling, vulnerable resolve that came only when someone is finally ready to stop running from the truth they've carried for too long. Come here, she whispered. The twins rushed to her bedside, one on each side. Nicole grabbed her mother's hand immediately. Tori stood closer to her shoulder, her chin quivering even though she tried to hold it together. Joel stayed a few feet from the bed, unsure whether to approach. His hands hung by his sides, tense but patient. Vernie looked at the girls, her voice trembling. I heard what he told you. Tori swallowed. Mom, please don't get upset. I'm not upset, Vernie interrupted softly. I'm scared and tired, but I'm not upset at you. Nicole leaned closer. Then, why did you call us back in? Vernie closed her eyes briefly as if gathering courage. When she opened them again, they glistened with a truth she had fought to suppress for 10 long years. Because you deserve answers, she whispered. Real ones. Tori's breath caught. Nicole's fingers tightened around her mother's hand. Vernie looked down at their joined hands, her voice cracking. I should have told you sooner. I should have told him sooner. But I convinced myself I was protecting you. From what? Tori whispered. From a world I didn't trust, Vernie said. From disappointment, from hurt, from the fear that history might repeat itself. Her gaze drifted toward Joel for a brief second before returning to her daughters. But keeping the truth from you, that wasn't protection, that was fear, and I'm sorry. Nicole's eyes filled instantly. Mommy, please just tell us. We can't keep guessing. The room held its breath. Vernie looked at both of them, her expression softening with maternal love so deep it almost broke her voice. Tori Nicole. She inhaled shakily. Yes, he is your father. The words fell into the room like a slow, heavy weight, quiet but impossible to ignore. The truth didn't explode. It didn't crash. It simply settled where it had always belonged. Nicole gasped loudly and threw herself forward, hugging her mother's arm. Tears spilled down her cheeks, fast and unfiltered. Why didn't you tell us? She cried. Why didn't you tell him? Tori turned her head away, wiping her face roughly, but tears kept slipping through her fingers. She whispered, I knew something didn't make sense. Vernie reached for her, her hand trembling. Tori leaned into her immediately, even though confusion twisted her features. I was scared, Vernie whispered. Scared of losing control. scared of letting someone else into our world, scared that if he came back into our lives, it might destroy me again. And I didn't want that pain anywhere near you." Nicole sobbed harder. Tori didn't speak but squeezed her mother's hand tightly. Joel stood motionless. He hadn't moved since she confirmed the truth. His chest rose unevenly, as if he had forgotten how to breathe correctly. His eyes softened, then filled, then softened again, an emotional tug-of-war he had never allowed himself to show publicly. 10 years of questions, 10 years of emptiness, 10 years of imagining a life he might have had, all answered in one trembling admission. He pressed a hand against his mouth briefly, not to hide emotion, but to steady himself. Vernie finally looked at him. Her expression wasn't defensive anymore. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even ashamed. It was exposed. "I didn't tell you because I didn't trust you," she said. "And because I didn't trust myself to survive it if you walked away again." Joel's lips parted, but no words came out. The twins looked at him now too, really looked at him, not as the man who helped them tonight, but as the man whose blood filled their veins, whose presence in the doorway suddenly felt different. Nicole wiped her eyes clumsily. Do you want us, even now?" Joel inhaled sharply, his voice unsteady but clear. "I wanted you the moment I saw you, and if I had known about you years ago, I would have been there since the beginning." Tori's tearful gaze softened. Something inside her seemed to unlock, a mixture of relief and heartbreak blending into fragile acceptance. Nicole reached toward him with one hand. It wasn't a full embrace. It wasn't certainty. It was an invitation. Joel stepped closer, slowly, almost reverently, as if afraid any sudden movement would shatter the moment. He knelt beside the bed and placed his hand in Nicole's. It fit, like it had been waiting for years. Tears slipped quietly down his cheeks, not dramatic, not loud, but real in a way no one in the room had ever seen from him. Vernie watched him silently. Her daughters held her hands. For the first time since the night began, the room didn't feel fractured. It felt like something broken was finally allowed to breathe. The room felt different after the confession, still heavy, still fragile, but no longer hiding anything. The truth had settled, and though its weight wasn't light, it was finally shared rather than balanced on Vernie's shoulders alone. Nicole kept Joel's hand clasped tightly, as if reassurance worked both ways. Tori wiped her face again and sat up straighter beside her mother, her voice soft but steady. "So, what happens now?" she asked. It was a fair question, a necessary one. Joel exhaled slowly, looking from Tori to Nicole, then to Vernie. "That depends on all of you," he said gently. "I don't want to force anything. I don't want to make decisions for your family. I just want to be part of it, if you'll let me." Nicole squeezed his hand, her voice trembling. "I want that." Tori didn't respond immediately, but her expression softened. She wasn't rejecting the idea. She was processing the possibility. Vernie looked between her daughters, then at Joel. There was hesitation in her eyes, but no walls. "I need time," she admitted. "I'm not saying no. I'm just overwhelmed." Joel nodded. "You're allowed to feel that way. You don't owe me instant forgiveness or trust." Vernie appreciated that more than she expected. He added, "But I won't disappear. Not now that I know." Nicole looked relieved. Tori lowered her gaze as though the weight of that promise touched something deeper than she expected. A nurse entered briefly to check Vernie's vitals, adjusting the monitor quietly before stepping out again. The interruption served as a reminder of how fragile the moment was, not just emotionally, but physically. Vernie was still recovering from brain surgery. This conversation wasn't just heavy, it was demanding. Joel noticed her wincing slightly and softened his tone. "You shouldn't push yourself. We can talk more later." But Vernie shook her head lightly. "No. Some things need to be said now." She looked at her daughters first. "I love you both more than anything in this world. Every decision I made, even the wrong ones, came from wanting to protect you." Tori reached for her hand. "We know, Mom. We just wanted the truth." "I know." Tears slipped again. "And you deserved it." Then she turned to Joel, and for the first time since waking, her voice carried less fear and more honesty. "I kept you out because I thought I was keeping us safe. But seeing how you came, running, how you stayed with them, how they held on to you tonight." She paused, breath shaking. "Maybe I was protecting us from something that wasn't real anymore." Joel swallowed, emotion tightening his jaw. "People grow, Vernie. I'm not the man who broke your trust. I promise you that." There it is again, she whispered. Promises. I know, he said quietly. Promises don't mean anything until you see them lived. That's why I'm not asking you to believe me now. I'm asking for the chance to show you. Something in her eyes flickered, soft, hesitant openness. Nicole looked between them, hope blooming across her face. Does this mean you and Mom might like each other again? Vernee let out a tired breath that almost resembled a laugh. Baby, right now I can barely lift my head without help. Let's not jump ahead. Joel chuckled softly, lowering his gaze. Let's start with being here, together. One step at a time. Tori crossed her arms, but it wasn't defiance. It was guarded curiosity. If you want to be part of this family, what are you going to do? Like actually do? Joel appreciated the directness. I'll be present, he said. Not just with words. I'll help however you need. Hospital visits, school, home. Whatever part of your lives you're willing to let me in, I'll show up. Nicole nodded as if that answered a deeper question she hadn't spoken aloud. Vernee whispered, I've never asked anyone for help, but tonight made me realize maybe I shouldn't have been doing this alone. Her voice wasn't an invitation, but it was the closest thing to one she had offered in a decade. Joel met her gaze, steady and sincere. You don't have to be alone anymore. Their eyes held for a moment, quiet, delicate, warm. It wasn't romantic in any dramatic sense. It was something subtler, two people recognizing that the past didn't have to dictate the future. Two people realizing that healing was possible, not because the pain vanished, but because truth finally had room to breathe. Tori watched them carefully. Nicole smiled through tears. Vernee shifted slightly, wincing again. I need rest. Yes, Joel said, standing. We'll give you space. But before he stepped back, Vernee whispered, Joel? He paused. She met his eyes with a softness that hadn't existed earlier. Thank you for coming. He nodded slowly, the words sinking into him with more meaning than she could have imagined. I always will. Nicole leaned over and kissed her mother's cheek. Tori adjusted the blanket around her shoulders with gentle care. As the girls stepped back, Joel spoke again, quiet but certain. No grand gestures, no big speeches. I'm going to prove myself by staying. Vernee closed her eyes, allowing those words to settle. The twins stood beside Joel, one on each side, as if symbolizing the beginning of a family finally allowed to form. Joel looked at them, at her, and whispered one final promise to all three. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Before you go, remember to like and comment to help this story reach someone who needs it. And if you want more powerful, life-changing stories, make sure you subscribe.